So this is actually sort of a prelude piece to the Natchitoches Industry Folk Festival coming up on next weekend, July 14th and 15th. We wanted to celebrate tradition throughout Louisiana. Our theme this year is keeping tradition alive. And that is, to say it correctly, is keeping tradition alive, because it's with the exclamation mark. We did that because it's alive. Folklife in Louisiana is, well, they're going to tell you all about this a lot more than I am. I will. But it's alive. It's here to stay, and it's not going anywhere. It always has been here, and it always will be here. It might not be the same tomorrow as it is today, but it's here. And so we want to celebrate that and talk about that. And it's, we started out with music by Ed and Hardrick, and we're so thankful for those guys. And they're going to talk to us also, because the folk are here because they have voices that need to be heard. We have Ed Huey, who is the honorary chair of the festival. We have Hardrick Rivers of many musical groups, and the Rivers Review. It was, and Ed will be inducted into the Folklife Center Hall of Master Folk Artists, and Hardrick's already a member. We have Elvin Shields, the president of the Natchitoches Genealogical and Historical Association. We have Dustin Fuqua, who is with the National Park Service and the Cane River Creole National Historical Park. We have Pete Gregory, who I think is at 53 years now, has been at NSU and is a professor of anthropology. We have Laura Gates, who was with the Cane River National Historical Park, and we're happy to welcome her back again, where she needs to have this voice, and we need to hear what she has to say. And then we have Susan Roach of Louisiana Tech, and she is a folklorist, and we're so happy, and also the department head, and we're so happy to have her here. And we were on the program. It said Maida Owens. We're going to very respectfully excuse her because she had car trouble in Kinder, and as someone who's been there and done that, I can fully sympathize. I'm going to leave this over to these guys. I just want to first thank the Park Service. The National Park Service's Lower Mississippi Delta Initiative is a large part, and maybe really, they're the reason we're here tonight. They wanted to highlight folk life and folk culture in the Delta and let people know what's going on and talk about the vibrancy of that. And it's Dustin Fuqua who made that happen. Without Dustin, that grant wouldn't happen. And 2 years ago, it happened because of Laura Gates. And that is just the truth. It would not have happened without them. And they took that all the way through, and we're so grateful for that. This is also made possible by the National Endowment for the Arts. That's the kind of caliber we have. There's a 19-year-old girl, Clancy Ferguson, came down from Arkansas and is now an NSU student. She's got the Clancy Ferguson Band, which is herself and whoever bluegrass people she can get to play with her. And she is this dynamite fiddler who won all these awards in Arkansas, and we're claiming her now as a Louisianan. And I'll tell you what, I put this 19-year-old girl into the National Endowment for the Arts. I put some of her videos on there of her playing live for some folks, and I knew I was going to get it. And we got that grant, and they highlighted her involvement in their little blurb about the festival, because that's what folk life is. When a 19-year-old can wow the National Endowment for the Arts, that's because this is real. We want to also thank the Natchitoches Historic District Development Commission, as well as the Jazz Fest and Heritage Festival Foundation, and of course CLECO, Citibank, and of course the Shreveport Regional Arts Council, and the Cane River National Heritage Area, and the Louisiana Division of the Arts. So if you're thinking, that's a long list. Well, it wouldn't be the same if it didn't include Arlene Gould of the City of Natchitoches and the Natchitoches Tourist Bureau, because she is also such an ally. And it's an ally, and all these people are here because folk life is real. This stuff is the stuff of the people, and without it, it's like Zora Neale Hurston said, it's that which the soul lives by, and you don't want to live without it. And I don't want to live in a world without Mardi Gras and gumbo and Christmas. And that's what we're here. We're here for that. And so I'm going to turn this over to our moderator, which is Pete Gregory.
Well, Shane, stop and think for me so I can sit down and pass this around to people who know something now about folk life, folk culture. We talk about that around here a lot. And somebody asked me the other day, what is that? what is folk life, folk culture. Well, I had a friend of mine used to teach at Northwestern years ago, Dr. Leroy Everson said, folk life and folk culture is what folks do. And who are the folks? Well, the folks are all kind of folks. And so we're people from different venues that deal with folk culture. Some of us as professional folklorists, some of us as anthropologists, some of us as musicians, some of us as craftspeople. We come at the folk culture of the state from a lot of different ethnic directions, a lot of different venues of what we do. And some of us are managers of ways of saving the culture, keeping the culture, giving the people a voice where they can talk about their own culture and not have somebody interpret it for them, somebody to keep us straight. So what Shane's talking about. So Mardi Gras is a real Mardi Gras and not a Disneyland Mardi Gras. So you're riding a horse, cracking a whip. So there are different kinds of Mardi Gras. So holding us to get to the, sort of too close to the, as the old folks say, close to the bone with Louisiana folk culture. This is something that we've all worked at pretty hard for a long time. And the Delta, if I said define the Delta, that's worse than defining folk life. There'll be 5, 6, 7 definitions of Delta out there amongst you. If you're from Louisiana, you've got that. If you're from Mississippi, you've got a different definition. And so we all talk about the Delta. And we talk about, Shane mentioned it earlier, the Delta Initiative. And the Delta Initiative is something that the National Park Service started and does. There's a whole stack of literature over here that we put together with grants from the Delta Initiative on Hispanic culture here, on Indian culture here, on Creole culture here, on music here, on folk life in general. And it's been a place that we could find support for what we do and what our people do, and ways to keep the traditions going. And so, my Delta, I grew up in Northeast Louisiana. To me, that's the Delta. It starts at the mouth of the Red River, runs to Arkansas, and bleeds over a little bit into Arkansas. Eddie Huey's Delta goes the other way up at the Arkansas-Louisiana line and splits off and goes through North Mississippi. And if you're from Arkansas, yeah, if you're from Arkansas, it'll run almost up to Missouri, to the Blue Hill of Missouri. And that's a big geographic region. It's a big cultural region. And so we talk about it culturally. We get the blues out of the Delta. We get commercial fishing out of the Delta. We get a lot of American Indian culture out of the Delta. So our Delta is a cultural place. The Delta Initiative deals with the Delta as a cultural place in a little different way. So we're going to sit down and talk about this, and I'm just going to pass it around to people and ask them to talk about things that they want to talk about and things that they usually talk about to us. And we've heard it before. I hope we've heard it. And I hope they tell us something new. And so I want to sit down and let Laura talk to you about the Delta Initiative and about the role of the National Park Service. The National Park Service, I think, is a much misunderstood institution. And it's not only misunderstood, it's underfunded. And it's your tax dollar at work on property that belongs to you. And so I thought, I've never heard anybody say that as well as Laura's. I've asked her to do it again. One more time, come back out of retirement.
Good evening, everybody. And when I think of the Delta, one of the favorite things that I think of is when Paul Simon starts off his song, Graceland, the Mississippi Delta shining like a national guitar. And I think, and he goes on and mentions all sorts of other facets of the Delta right at the beginning of that song. And the Delta, to me, has always been a place that is raw. It has so much culture, so much possibility, so much potential. And this is the kind of place where I live now. As you know, I worked for the Park Service for a very long time, and the last 19 years of my Park Service career was working here at Cane River Creole National Historical Park. But I wanted to bring all of you back a little bit further to kind of get to understand the context of how we got to the Lower Mississippi Delta Region initiatives. And this goes back actually to the 1980s with the, I can't remember what number of Congress it was, but the year was, it was the 100th Congress. And in 1988, Congress passed a law, and it was signed by President Clinton at the time, to create the Lower Mississippi Delta Development Commission. And that commission was to look at developing a 10-year economic plan for the Delta and try to find some drivers to push the economy forward. Part of the things that plan did was also designate the counties and parishes that were included within the Delta region. And this is a map of those, and I'll pass it around. It's 219 counties and parishes. It does go all the way up into Missouri and a little bit of Illinois, as well as a little tiny corner of Tennessee. But those are the areas that were affected by this piece of legislation and the subsequent legislation that was passed by the 103rd Congress. We'll pass that around to everybody. And the 103rd Congress passed some very interesting bits of legislation. One of my favorites was Public Law 103-449, which created Cane River Creole National Historical Park. Okay, now can you hear me better? Okay. Which is a gem of a national park. Another piece of legislation that was passed was Public Law 103-433, and that law, besides lots of other things, included the Lower Mississippi Delta Region initiatives. Now, remember, when Congress passes a law, they can authorize all sorts of things, but then if funding is not appropriated for those things, there are lots of things that do not happen even though they're authorized. But please note that authorized under that legislation that was passed in 1994 were the development of an African American heritage trail throughout the Delta, the development of an American Indian heritage trail, and the construction of American Indian cultural centers, and that's how it was phrased in the legislation. It also had it pushed the National Park Service to complete a study of the Delta and look at sites that were significant in terms of their history, their culture, their prehistory. And it provided an opportunity for grant funding to fund all sorts of projects. So that's just a very brief summary of what was included in the Delta initiatives. Again, this is law, and some of the money was appropriated for the study that was completed. It's a large 2-volume study that was completed about 1998 about the resources of the Delta, and that's available. Dusty can point you to how to get a hold of a copy of that. But consistently, starting in 1995, when I was superintendent at Arkansas Post National Memorial up in Arkansas, which is like almost right next to the Mississippi. It's at the confluence of the Arkansas and Mississippi rivers. The National Park Service was involved in the Lower Mississippi Delta Region initiatives, and money was set aside at our Washington office level, and the superintendents were engaged in working with communities and doing partnerships, especially connecting those partnerships or enabling cultural groups or assisting other entities like universities to do studies similar to the ones that are up there on the side table. And there were, over the years, because I worked with the Delta initiatives for more than 20 years, I have some favorite projects. And one of my favorite projects, and this was incredibly meaningful, was when a young woman from the Jena Band of Choctaw pulled together the first ever United Choctaw Nations Conference. The first ever. She got backing not only from her tribe, but from the Mississippi Choctaw and the Oklahoma Choctaw. They all gathered together in Jena, and they talked about the issues that they're all facing, like language conservation among the tribe, because Choctaw, Pete can tell you about all the different kinds of Choctaw language, linguistic issues there are. But that was such an incredible feat that this young woman, Dana Masters, who is now working on her doctorate at South Mississippi. Anyway, she's working on her doctorate right now. And she pulled this together with, I think the Delta Initiative's funding that was provided to her was under $20,000. She took that, she matched it with funds from all of the 3 Choctaw nations and pulled together this conference where the elders had a chance to all talk with each other, where everyone gathered. So that was one of my favorite projects. But I have, I could go on forever because pretty much every Delta project that I got to be connected with in one way, shape, or form, it was one of my favorite projects. So over the years, with a small bit of money that was available, sometimes it might just be one project, like the Folklife program every summer. Things like that. Just a little bit of seed money went a long way. And it's money that went to partners to enable them to do what they did best and what they excelled in and did incredible things with. So it was money that we set aside specifically to help others. And as you know, I've been gone from the Park Service now for about 1.5 years, so I have no clue what kind of funding is available, if there is any funding available through the Delta initiatives. But Dusty can fill you in on the background of that. But that's kind of a summary of what it was. So think about the first law started off as just basic economic development. The second law moved it a little bit forward and looked at heritage tourism, looked at the importance of cultures in the Delta, because the cultures are part of what defines the Delta, as well as the geology, the rivers, things like that. But the cultures are so critical to all of this. So all of that is approved, authorized in the legislation. And that's how we were able to accomplish things when there was funding available. Now we're in a different world now, as we all know, and things are tough. But I think that somehow we have to survive. We will survive. So I'll just stop there.
Dustin might have another take on the initiative. He's done it. Well, he could tell you the process, maybe. It might be how you got to do it. And you can tell them what happened last time since you were successful.
Thanks, Doc. My name is Dustin Fuqua, Chief of Resource Management at Cane River Creole National Historical Park. Had the pleasure of working with Laura for the past going on 16 years I've been there. So I've been in the Natchitoches area since about '99. Lived here pretty much the whole time, just recently moved to Alexandria. But I'm pretty familiar with the area. I'm raised in the Delta. I know I'm up here in a uniform, but I like to consider myself kind of a folk too. I was raised by the folks, and I like the folk ways. In terms of the Delta Initiative funding source, it's a little known fund source. It's a little known opportunity. A lot of the way that grants work in the government, especially in the National Park Service, is that funding sources are basically advertised. You advertise the opportunity for this funding source, and you can go out and compete for it. What we call LOMI, the Lower Mississippi Delta Initiative, is a little bit different. And we have more control at the park level, where we can work with folks, if you will, and identify probably about 2 projects a year. So this past year, one of the projects that was proposed was Dr. Shane's Folklife Center project, Folklife Festival project. So we put in the project, explain and justify the whole means, and we more or less, the way it's designed is there are so many parks, Laura mentioned earlier, like the number of parks in the LOMI, which is about 10 or 12, something like that. You all pretty much have to compete against each other for the fund source. There's only so much money available. You go to a board meeting situation, you all bring your projects together, and the panel talks it out. And sort of that's how the money is divided up. That's how the funding is allocated in different ways. So if anyone is interested, our process is that you come to us, or we come to you if we identify a problem, or if you have something that you want to work with, and we just basically go from there at a case-by-case basis. A lot of times, matching funds are a good thing. So if you have an idea for a project and you know that the project is going to cost you $10,000 for the project, well, if you can show that your organization can put up some time, can match a little bit of resources, what we call an in-kind contribution, then actually you have better chances. So the more matching you have there, the better. So that's sort of how it works. The money then goes directly to our park, and then through what we call a task agreement, we work with the partner, and there's a lot of paperwork involved in it. Dr. Shane can tell you, about the stack about yay high. And once you get all that done, it's the mechanism to move the funding from the National Park Service to the partner. So hopefully our funding for the Folklife Festival is in NSU's bank account right now. That's kind of the hard part about it, is that those technicalities. But that's how it works, Doc.
Okay. Yeah. Dustin is from a particular part of the Delta. Since Maida's not here, Maida Owen is a state folklorist in Baton Rouge. I had asked Maida if she could come tonight, and she had car trouble, like Shane told you. And I was going to ask Maida to talk about down south, the southern end of the state. And an awful lot of people down there have been doing an awful lot of things. That part of Louisiana has lots of ecological problems, and the coastline's going away. People's economies are changing. Whole communities are being displaced and having to move. And so there's a lot of cultural trauma in Louisiana. And up here it's a little different. We're not quite confronted with some of the problems they have. And so I was going to ask Maida to talk about what they're doing to conserve their own culture. What do they do to keep their traditional things together? And unfortunately, I'm not cognizant of everything they do down there for themselves. But I do know the Homa tribe has language programs going down. The Homa tribe has crafts programs going down. There are different groups. And the very southern end, I'm going to ask Dustin to help me out here. Dustin's worked a lot with the preservation of the French language in Louisiana. He started the Table process here, where we get together once a month and just talk French, good or bad, or otherwise just talk French. Some of you have been coming, and we struggle, but we make it. And he's worked with people in South Louisiana, and both of us have worked with a little bit with Codafil, Council for the Development of French in Louisiana, trying to keep the language alive and keep the language going. And so maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
So my training is as an anthropologist, trained by none other than Dr. Gregory, right here next to me. It's just being an anthropologist, especially a native-born anthropologist, it's a pleasure to work here, because this is my people. French, African American, Spanish, Native American, you name it. We're the most diverse place on the planet. The Delta is the hub of diversity for us. So just such a wonderful opportunity every day to work. Now, in particular with the Delta, a lot of the cultures in the Delta share the same sort of challenges. So we mentioned Native Americans and the language issues. It's amazing that there are Native American languages still being spoken today. That they haven't gone by the wayside. And that's some of the projects that we've worked with different tribes through the Delta Initiative project to foster. So those are kind of some of the things we share. Now, taking it from the Native American to the French Creole or Acadian folks, same, very similar thing. Language loss is a big issue, you know, where the old folks are not getting any younger, and after they're gone, we're losing them. So one of the efforts that we put together, and it was at a sort of a grassroots level, is we started La Table Française au Nakitage in 2012, a few years ago. And that was a way for us to create a venue to bring together Francophones, people that speak French. And while it was an emphasis on Louisiana French, the kind of French spoken around here in the colonial period to this day, it's not exclusively limited to Louisiana French. It's open, you know, it's international, our standard French. And that's, you know, part of the whole diversity thing. Which we want. We want to enrich our culture. We don't want to be stuck in that isolate forever. So those are some, you know, some of the sort of things. Is that what you were looking for, Doc?
Yeah, you might tell them about Nunu and Lachman Francais. Okay. It's going a little further south.
Yeah. So I mean, we started off talking about the United States government sponsored programs like these grants. People working with the National Park Service, state governments. But so much of folklife preservation started at the roots, you know, the grassroots level, the people themselves. Great example is a place in Arnoldville, Louisiana called Nunu Art and Culture Collective. And what it is an old sweet potato barn that they adaptively reused and turned into a cultural center. There's an art gallery in there, and they host you know, rotating art. Different artists come through, and that's pretty much the big place where you have a French table event that happens once a month. They have their French table the last Saturday of the month at 11 o'clock, and you can set your watch by it. You know, you go into a place, and there's no less than 35, 40 people there, strong Francophone people that they live for that. That's what, you know, that's their thing. They go to this to go speak French. And that place, starting off in that sort of a way, where it was kind of started off artsy, but it more went toward culture, now it has become sort of like the Mecca for Louisiana French in the region, basically. They have a lot of events there at the international level. Folks from, I mean, the mayor of Paris 2 years ago led a little parade through the little small town of Arnoldville. So, and they're garnering a lot of interest from the international community. You know, folks come from all over to go to this place to experience that culture. And that's the sort of things that we have here. That's the richness that we have.
Elvin, talking about the cultural, people putting the culture together or helping keep the culture going. This is Elvin Shields. He's the president of the Geological Society. We know him in a whole other hat. He's been working at Oakland on the Cane River Park for quite some time. He volunteers. He's worked on some projects there I think are really cool. So maybe we'll get Elvin to talk a little bit about that. Besides that, he makes these neat little animals out of wine. My students love him. I bring him to class, but they won't leave until he makes these little animals. You know what I'm saying? And, you didn't bring your wire.
Too bad. Can't do that anymore. Basically, I retired from Corps of Engineers in 2011. Came back to Natchitoches, and the two homes on Oakland Plantation that my family lived in, my mother and the rest of the kids and my oldest sister and her kids lived in those homes. And those were the only two 1860 slave/sharecropper homes left. I almost fainted because out of the other 20 or 30 within mile and a half, 2 mile radius, they're gone. And the life and stories and culture of the black sharecroppers in this area is gone also. So I say, we got to do something. So I went down to Laura's office and I say, Laura, we got to do something. We got to turn my old homes into something to recognize that the sharecroppers were here. And she said, gee, what would that be? I said, well, I'm just going to decorate one of the slave sharecropper homes into a sharecropper home / museum, whatever. I'm going to decorate it the way all sharecroppers' homes were decorated from the 20s all the way through the 60s when we lived on it. I left in 62. I came to Oakland in 54 as a child of sharecroppers. And Oakland is my home, as well as the last plantation owners' kids. And I feel it's my home too. So I wanted to add something to it. And so I think it's great. But what's not happening and what need to happen is more focus on the North Louisiana cotton sharecroppers, which is, since collective farming and corporate farming have taken over, nobody talks about sharecroppers anymore. So that's why when I got connected into that, I also got connected with Shane and Pete with the Folklife Festival. And I would show up with my plantation toys, which is twisted wire. I started making at 5 years old. Now this is the only thing that was made by little black boys from Bermuda Bridge going all the way to Clutcheville. My wife's brothers grew up plantation north of Bermuda Bridge. They never seen it, they never heard of it. At the same time, these people living less than 10 miles apart. And as long as I could remember, I was born at Melrose in 1948, and the first thing I remember playing with was one of these wire toys from my older brothers and uncles. And to believe that people just 10 miles apart, never seen them, never heard of them, I said, gee, I got to stop making these again. So I did a talk, and I think it was July 2011, something like that, in front of the cabin that I grew up in. And a little boy asked me, he said, what kind of toys you guys have? I said, well, I guess you know we didn't have a Walmart. I said, so we made our own toys. And this little boy must have been about 11 years old. He looked at the other one, then he looked at us and says, you know, that old man's got to be lying. So what I done, I come back home and I told my wife, I'd say, Betty, you know, these kids don't believe we made our own toys. So I went out and got some wire, and I started twisting. And about 400 toys later, I finally stopped. I said, that's enough. But I put them wherever I can, display them wherever I can, and I show kids how to do them. But the great thing about the Folklife Festival at Northwestern that I've done almost every year since I've been here is that when I sit there with these toys and I talk about sharecropping and I talk about life on plantation and life on a farm generally, I will have some 85-year-old white lady walk up to me and say, yeah, I pick cotton too. And she'd probably stand 5'1" and maybe 110 pounds. And I look at her and go, how much cotton did you pick? Oh, I picked cotton. And I get more and more people telling me that, yes, we pick cotton too. And I say, well, you know, that's not enough people passing that on to their children and grandchildren. That, yes, everybody was sharecroppers and farmers, small farmers, and it was the same thing, though. You were still a sharecropper because by the time you paid the bills, you wound up with about the same amount. And if you worked for your daddy, it was the same thing. You know? But that was the life of that. So I got into things that I never would have gotten into, going from one to the other to the other. But in college, I always liked history. And when I retired, most guys retired from Washington, D.C. area. They go home for 2 weeks and they come back next week as a contractor, sitting in the same general vicinity. And they say, Elvin, you're going to do the same thing everybody else is doing because the money's just too good for you to go to Louisiana. So about once a year, they'll call and say, "You still down there?" I say, "Oh yeah, just having a great old time." But that's basically what we see it is. But even at home now, we still do the same thing. Well, I grow the fruits and veggies, and my wife, she cans them. Stand up, Betty. She's, no, you got to stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up. She still do what we did growing up as kids on the plantation. She cans, I grow, she cans. And when friends and relatives come to town, they go, "How much of this are you going to give me?" I go, no, it's not happening like that. But occasionally we'll put a bow around it and give it to them for Christmas.
Susan, you're over there. This is Dr. Susan Roach. She's from up at Louisiana Tech. Hearing about the white lady picking cotton makes me think about the hill country. The hill country is marginal to the Delta. And back in, when was it, Susan? 70. We drug Susan down out of the hills. Yeah, we drug Susan down out of the hills. Maida Owen and I and a couple other people. We took her to a place called Poverty Point. And yeah, we did some workshops on folk life where we were trying to train people to help us help the communities keep their folk cultures going, and trying to collect folk cultural stuff like Elvin's talking about, his fire toys and everything. So we invited a lot of people to Poverty Point, and so we disenfranchised Susan. We brought her down out of the hills into the edge of the Delta, Mason Ridge, which is still kind of in the hills, and so she wound up going back to Tech, and so the small farms, independent small farms, way more white people than black people in the hill country, and so Anglo-American culture, I think, has become something Susan's spoken to really well for a very long time. I think her dissertation was on quilting.
And growing African American quilts
Yeah,
in North
yeah.
Louisiana.
So I would let her talk a little bit about North Louisiana culture, and she's got the Delta down in her pocket too. So she's multicultural, bicultural.
Thank you, Pete. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I think actually I got dragged into the Delta before that because Bob Gates wanted us to do a Delta Folklife survey, and I was over there at Tech at that time. Well, maybe that was even, yeah, I was already at Tech, and wanted us to see what was out there in the Delta. And you know, I was scared of the flatland. I remember that. We talked about that before because I was used to hills and valleys, lots of trees, and that Delta was wide open, and there was no shade until you got way off the beaten path around by the river or the bayous and rivers and so forth. When I think of the Delta, I think of that flat open land, and I think of the Mississippi River. And one of the first things I was able to get to there in my field work was around Lake Providence, which is only about an hour and a half from where I live. And I saw the most incredible river baptizing going on. And do you know what? It's still going on today. There are a group of African American churches there in Lake Providence, and they still get together in August, and they have river baptism. I want to give you a little photo from that very first experience that I had. Maybe you can pass these out. This is a bookmark from Delta Pieces, and that Poverty Point workshop that he was talking about, that was actually a field school for the Delta Folklife project that the state had organized by that time, and that followed up on that late 1988, 89 work that we had done, and that was like early 90s, 91, 92, I think we were over there. And Pete and Maida and I were kind of running this workshop, and we told, people, see if you can find any of these traditions and things like Easter rock. And one of our students went out and found Easter rock that was still going on, and Pete thought it was gone, and I'd never seen it, and I'd heard about it. It's an Easter Eve vigil ritual that has gone on in Louisiana since the antebellum times, and it really celebrates the resurrection of Christ, and it's like a ring shout in some ways, but the only place that we know of that it's really occurred is the North Louisiana Delta. Start going up as far as we've heard it, like Providence, though we never saw it there, but we heard about it being there, all the way down into Wisner and Faraday and that area around Clayton. And Janet Sturman actually was an anthropologist at Northwestern around the early 90s, and she had found it in Clayton and did an article for the Louisiana Folklife Journal here and did a little video. And actually that is now in an article in the accumulated work of called Delta Pieces. And that's what we put a lot of that work that was done for the Delta Folklife project and the field school. We sent people out like Annie Staten, who was a librarian at Drew Elementary in Monroe, and she did work on shape note singing and on Easter rock and a lot of that. And we followed up even more lately. Annie and I have been doing more work on Easter rock, and it's still going on in one church only. And it's changed, though. A lot of times they lost it, like at Clayton. I think Mrs. Martha Daniels told me that they discontinued it. A lot of their leaders for it got old. And then another thing that happened was they built a new church. I think their church had termites or something. And so they built a new church. And the new church was a concrete slab church. And she said you can't rock on that floor. You have to have a wooden floor. Because the way the rock works is they march around a long table, sort of like this that we have here, covered with a white cloth. They do a processional around it, and then they go into this rock step. But you can see video of it in our Delta Pieces article. And it sounds like a drum. But with a concrete floor, you lost the drum. So, and, in the antebellum times, African Americans weren't allowed to have drums. So they improvised. They had drums with their feet. This is not exactly a wooden floor. It looks like wood, but it's not really wooden. So I don't think you could rock very well on this floor. But, people adapt their traditions, hopefully, and learn to go on with them. There's a group in Winsboro that's kept up the rock, and I'm so excited. That's my one piece of Delta Folklife research that I've been able to kind of maintain by going back to Winsboro every year and helping document the Easter rock there. This group is led by Hattie Addison, and she really had to improvise because they were rocking at the original True Light Baptist Church, and their church got in really bad shape. And so she went to the VFW Hall, then she moved it to the Winsboro Community Center, the Jack Hammons Community Center in downtown Winsboro, and that was a concrete building downtown. And so what they did one time is they put in some risers, some wooden risers. We were kind of scared because they were, the rocking gets pretty intense, and I was scared they were going to fall off the risers. But I think she kind of got that idea because we presented Easter rock at the Louisiana State Folklife Festival and the Smithsonian Festival of American Folklife, now called the Smithsonian Festival, I believe. In 1997, it was there, and it's also been presented at Jazz Fest. And I think that attention that Easter rock got helped preserve it, and also gave Hattie the idea that she could move around with that Easter rock. It wasn't bound to the church. And of course, that's kind of tinkering with the tradition, and that's a problem sometimes. for us as folklorists. But at any rate, there is an article in Delta Pieces work. The reason I brought the bookmarks was I did want you to know that there is this accumulated publication online, a virtual book. You don't need a bookmark for it, a material bookmark, but you might want to bookmark it on your computers because it's a lot of information there from many, many different people that have worked in the Delta. And the premier of those is Dr. Gregory here, who has his Delta musings. Pete had written back in the late 80s, I think that was when you actually did that, was when we were first doing that first survey. And we said, well, Pete knows more about the Delta than anybody. He needs to sit, he needs to write his words about the Delta. And he gave me, because I was kind of collecting all the stuff, and he gave me, I don't know how many pages, handwritten, beautiful, handwritten pages of things on the Delta. Delta nightlife, Delta music, Delta Indians in the Delta. It just go. They're all there in Delta Pieces. Just go read them. It's beautiful. He wrote about his growing up in Faraday and what was there in the Delta. So I think all of those very diverse pieces, like a big quilt, I saw it as just a bunch of really almost unrelated pieces that had to be put together into some sort of, it's not even a finished patchwork, it's the beginning. There was so much in the research that was not put in there. And so many things that we didn't have time to research. What we wound up putting in Delta Pieces, I wish Maida were here to talk about it, because she and I kind of, just sort of made some arbitrary decisions because it was funded by the National Park Service and the State Folklife Program, and Tech let me put in my time. And we just, put this thing together really fast in a couple of years. And it really needed about 10 years to put it all together because there was so much. And it wouldn't have been 68 essays, it would have been 168 essays or more. That if we had been able to write everything that we had, there's a lot of information that we still have. But there's so much that was not done. And now all of that has changed. The old Mississippi River fishermen that I interviewed up in Lake Providence, Whitey Shockley, has passed on. He went to the Smithsonian. He wowed people on that stage talking about fishing and telling fish stories. He was incredible. And, I'm thinking, was anybody doing commercial fishing on the Mississippi? We don't know. Nobody's going out and looking as far as I know at this point. But I did find out that my neighbors across the street in Ruston, his son is doing commercial fishing on the Ouachita River. And he bought me the most incredibly beautiful mess of Appaloosa, Appaloosa, not Appaloosa, Appaloosa catfish. Oh God, huh? Oh, okay, well, we don't do French up here, but but anyway, and this is a hill country person going over to the Delta in Ouachita to catch catfish to sell, and I don't know where he's selling them, but this is one of his young sons. So that gives me hope that he is still, that the traditions are still going on, and that maybe some of the younger people are out there fishing on the Mississippi. The farming is another thing that we really didn't delve into enough. We talked to Bubba Brown at Panola Plantation, and there were so many more people. And now there's this whole new local food movement and organic food movement and the farmers markets everywhere. And guess where the Ruston farmers market people come from mainly? The biggest farmers don't come from the Ruston area. They come from Oak Grove, which is over there in kind of the hilly part over there in, West Carroll Parish. It's, on the Mason Ridge, but that dirt's a lot richer than our dirt. And those farmers grow a lot more food than we grow. But, the two or three biggest farmers at the Ruston Market are from Oak Grove. So go figure, we need to find out what's going on with those farmers and their vegetable farming. I think the research really needs to be done. The music needs to be done. And the bluegrass, for example, up around the hill country and going over into the Delta, there used to be a really strong bluegrass club, but that has kind of morphed in or kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. I guess somebody claimed the name back because the name wasn't paid for or something. I don't know. But anyway, now people are meeting in smaller groups in more local communities, like churches, fires, in the fire station or something like that. So that's kind of changing. We need to find out what's going on with all that, and we need some folklorists, some anthropologists in the northern part of the state to get back out and see what is really surviving. I don't get out in the field too much. I'm so excited I even get to go to Easter Rock and go visit the farmers at the farmers market. But I think we really need to have some programs in our universities that can train some students to go out. We had the Regional Folklife program, which was based at Northwestern. Dana Lee was there for a long time. We had Laura Westbrook and Ray Brasher at University of New Orleans, and I was at Tech for 10 years, from 1999 to 2009, and I was able to do a lot of research around the Delta and the North Central area at that time, but that program was closed in 2009. Now I'm in an administrative job, and so, we've closed programs at no, not ULM, but at Northwestern, the program has closed for the Folklife, or the anthropology program, right? And so that's what I see as one of the biggest challenges that we face is the lack of students to go. When I teach my folklore course every other year, I have my students do a little research, but it's a small class and they can only do one project. We need long-term students and majors and going out to do this work. And I could go on and on, but visit Delta Pieces, please. About Pete.
It is changing. Last year, with the help from the heritage area, the Chapel Eye heritage area, Chapel Eye Basin heritage area, get it right. We did a talk in Vidalia, Louisiana, on the edge of the Mississippi River about commercial fishing in the Delta. We had about almost 100 people show up, and most of them were either the descendants of commercial fishermen or the sons of people who run markets and set up ice plants and built boats, and we had a wonderful time. So we're going to do that again in some other places pretty soon. The fishing is different, but it's still alive, and the traditional things are still, there's still net makers and boat builders and people working all over the state. And it's pretty wonderful. Ray Brasher, she just mentioned, just did a wonderful documentary on something called a push boat. Man built a push boat on the lower end of the Chapel Eye River and documented this old gentleman building this boat. Beautiful thing. And, so we're working on these things still. We didn't quit. Lots of us are still working on the fishing and other things. And, some things we worked on more. That in mind, I'd kind of like to pass the mic down to the musicians. They've been quiet. It's hard for musicians to be quiet. And so I'd like for them to talk about kind of traditional stuff. We've done this around here before, but if I can get it down there and let them talk about the local music. And you want to try it?
Before you go, if you're still looking for river baptism, we have it at my church. I think we have it in July. It's called the St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church in Bermuda. And we take people out in the Cane River. And that was where I was baptized. My wife was baptized, and everybody I knew down there was baptized. And we're still doing it. and no one was bitten by a snake or alligator or anything. So we're probably going to have it again next month.
Hardwick? Oh, yeah, this one, July. See, Hardwick is kind of our traditional bear here. He's been here I guess all his life. He's played music ever since anybody. And so I'd like Hardwick to kind of give us, I've talked to him about this a number of times, and he has perspective on how music has changed around here. And that perspective goes all across the Delta. From here to Mississippi and all the way to New Orleans. Very similar things have happened. So I asked Hardwick if he could just kind of talk about what's going on here and how it's changed.
It's been my experience. As Dr. Gregory said, I probably should have been here all my life, but I ran off 23 years to go see what California was like. And I found out you could starve to death and you couldn't in Powhatan, so I got back here. But yeah, the annual Folklife Festival, I was introduced to that by Dr. Hadley 38 years ago. And I've been one of many, but I've been one that has been on the card for 38 times. And I think this is the 38th that's coming up next week.
Next year, 39.
39, so I didn't want to put it in front. I wanted to make sure I had all my stuff behind
We'll
me.
be there next year too.
Yeah.
That'd be 40. But anyway, the music here, I used to when I was a kid, I used to come to listen to live music. It was live music all over the place. In the parish of Natchitoches, it was live music on the side of the roads. On every road, they had nightclubs. And so, you know, if you lived in a neighborhood, all you had to do was just go someplace in your neighborhood where a nightclub was, and they were promoting a lot of live entertainment during that time. So it was all somebody's band playing. Either local, from out of town, meaning you could hear over to Lawrence, or you could hear B.B. King, or Gladys Knight, or whomever that was in the area, because they all traveled up and down Highway 1 and Mansfield and all around. They were here all the time. Every weekend it was a big show and a little show. Little show, continuous. So I was liking what I was hearing. And I did my school thing and learned how to play first. And then I got confused. Because then they started wanting to teach me other music like the blues, and I didn't know nothing about blues. All I knew was notes in front of me. But over time, it pretty much, as Overton told me one time, I didn't have no tone. He said, boy, you can play, but you ain't got no tone. And so his sax player told me, he said, well, you know what you got to do is you got to go to the woodshed. You know, and so we had a barn crib. I went to the woodshed. And I would practice the dog, but I would practice and practice and practice. And I met some other guys that wanted to teach me jazz. And I started understanding more about jazz. And that part of the blues is still coming on. And so we played the radio, we played everything that was on the radio because we wanted to be popular. But the blues just kept nagging. So eventually, watching what was going on in the area, we're talking, one of the panelists said that at one point, percussion music was not allowed by blacks. They had to cut it out. I think it was somewhere in China. But anyway, they cut it out. Well, Natchitoches has done a lot of the same. They cut all music out downtown. And for years, we were under, I don't know whose law it was, but we were under somebody's law. And eventually there was a turn of events. Northwestern started winning football games. And after they did that, somebody came up with an idea that we would start putting music on Front Street and call it Boogie on the Bricks. And so we started back having live music downtown now. It was 20 years, it was nothing, you know, but it had a disclaimer going with that. You could play music downtown Natchez as long as it ended by till 10 p.m. You couldn't have any music past 10 p.m. So we had to work with that. And there are still places in the historic district that will not allow live music past 10 p.m. So, you know, we're not, but I've learned to understand that that's a comfortable time to be at home. You know, I've been doing this, this is my 49th year of playing music. So I can't wait to see the Big 5-0. I may get a piece of cheesecake or something next year. But I've watched the music come, I watched the music go. I was playing here on Front Street, and we were playing jazz on Sundays. We had little jazz matinees and things like that. And people were coming from church and coming to have lunch. It was good, but there was only two kinds of music at that time. It was only jazz on Sundays or rock and roll, pretty much. Country music always had its place here. Folk music always had its place. We didn't have blues. So 22 years ago, I started across the river bringing blues into Natchez once a month for an annual blues jam. That caught on. Here we had a guy named Junior Doty, who was, I guess he was an anthropologist as well, but he did a study on Delta blues music. And he went up and down the Delta in a little old trailer that you could barely put behind anything. And he stayed in that thing and he did his research and he come out with a documentary and did a really good job exposing all of the clubs. I mean, as many as he could come up find in the Delta. And he got in somehow or another, his documentary got in touch with CNN. And CNN in 2000 came down and did a story. And they brought the story, they housed the story at Rock's Blues Hall. And my band played for the background music for it. That thing went worldwide. I mean, and that was in May that we did this. In January of the following year, they showed the documentary. And worldwide, CNN just did a big blast of it. And we started getting people in here from all kinds of countries. You know, it was I couldn't talk to them, but they knew who I was, so I had to humor them, maybe. But, I mean, we had people that would call over the rocks and find out, make sure they wanted reservations, and we would be from, I've had people talk to me from South Africa, say they came to the United States to see New York City, Memphis, Tennessee, and Natchez Blues Jam. That blew me out the water, you know, that people were that, you know, it was on their agenda to come here. But since then, I've met Ed Hewitt, who had to finish doing what he was doing, working toward his retirement. And he moved back home. And he's just been a blessing in disguise because this man is so talented musically, multi-talented, I'll add. What he sees in me, I don't know. But we get more we get more opportunities to play for small functions and this kind of thing. And we do big shows, we do festivals and all. And I'm looking forward to the folk festival again this year. I understand there's going to be some folk inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think there's a number of 4 people or something like that, maybe. And we're all interested in bringing everybody on that's been a voice. So I'm going to keep it short. But Natchez is a good place to hear good music. We have the best talent in adjoining parishes here. I do a television show once a month, local television show where I do what's called Natchitoches Blues Jam. And I try to reach out to musicians that don't necessarily live in Natchitoches, but surrounding areas, to bring the talent so people can see them. Because we have such great musical balance here. We've got country music pickers that should have been recorded many years ago. We've got folk players. Everybody's got an acoustic guitar there. I mean, it's just so much music around here. Maybe Mr. Hewitt can tell you more.
I moved back to Natchitoches in 2012. I drove into Natchitoches on the Christmas Festival day of 2012, and I knew that I had to come in by the bypass. I live across the river on Williams Avenue. So I knew I had done the right thing because I had on Bermuda shorts on Christmas Festival day, and we bought a house on the river because we always wanted to live on the Cane River. And I'm laid up there on that lounge, taking a nap on Christmas Festival day in shorts, in that shade. I said, Lord have mercy, this is the right thing. And later that month, I was asking musicians about, what was what. I figured I had moved from Chattanooga, which is a large place, a lot going on. I figured, well, I'm moving to the end of the world. My music career is probably pretty much over. I met Hardwick Rivers at the Jam at Rocks that year. And then the rest of that's kind of like history, but I'm busier than I've ever been. I mean, I don't know how I've had time to work. I've been a musician doing one thing or another all my life. And I was just thinking when we were talking about sharecroppers and farmers and all that kind of thing. My grandmother lived on Wells Island Road, right up or down from the airport, first airport in Shreveport. She lived on the riverside. And across the street, across the road, wasn't the street at that time, but across that road, there were cotton fields almost from the airport all the way up to, I guess what they call acres back in the day. And so that was cotton. And the people that worked in the fields over there were singing in the fields. That's before 16-row cotton pickers and all that kind of stuff. The people who worked in the fields were singing. I was just 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old. And that's what I grew up listening to. And I knew there was a whole lot more to music than what I was hearing on the radio and what I was hearing on the record player and that kind of thing. And then I got interested in folk music. I got a guitar pretty young, but I got interested in folk music. And then in the dorm, I went to Northwestern. In the dorm, somebody would come running in and say, man, I just learned a new song. We just sitting around a circle playing. I just learned a new song. You know, see this chord, listen to this. They play that chord. And it was like, the promised land. That was only one chord, And then somebody came in playing the St. Louis Blues, all right? Playing St. Louis Blues on a ukulele. Dawn to dawn to dawn to dawn to dawn to dawn. And then I thought that was the coolest thing I ever heard. First one thing led to another, and I discovered Huddy Leadbelly in the dorm room, West Casper Hall, in Henry Joyner's room. And I thought I was pretty hot because, we were doing like the Kingston Trio and like the Brothers Four and some stuff by the Highwaymen. I thought that was folk music. But when Huddy Leadbelly came on, I knew that what I was doing, it wasn't that. And then that connected with what I heard across the road from my grandmother's house. Then the further that you get into the music and the more you learn about the music, then you pull back a layer of it and you see that layer, and then behind that layer, there's another layer. And then you go back to the beginning of what was recorded in the teens and 20s. And that's the bone. And then everything else is meat that was on the bone. And it seemed like that the further back I got into it, the better I liked it, and the more I liked about it. And the other thing was that if you're going to study classical music, you go to the university or you go to the conservatory, and at the conservatory, then you learn the masters of that music. You learn to perform that music, note for note. And then within that note for note, there's always room that you can put your own interpretation in, because you can't perform like nobody can. All of the guitar pieces from this early music are nowadays available on, you can get a DVD lesson that tells you how to play, teaches you how to play like in the style of this person. And I thought it was important to learn these pieces of music and learn as much as I could about how to play it that way. I've always been drawn to one person sitting down with a guitar or a harmonica and being able to entertain a whole crowd of people. And so that's how I came to it. Then I learned how to play the harmonica. And then there just weren't that many people that could play harmonica. And then, not like I could play it exactly. So
That's true.
I got to I got to meet people like Hardwick. First time I went on the bandstand with Hardwick gave me a test. I gave him my card. I thought that's what you're supposed to do. He called me up on the bandstand at Rocks, and I said, what are we playing? He said, he named some blues that was just a standard blues tune. And then he said, then he called The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King. And I asked him what key. And he told me this arcane key that they played it in. So I knew how to play it. He said, can you do that? And I said, yes. So I think he was just wanting to see if I could actually play in a minor key. And I could.
Can you play it for us, Eddie?
Play The Thrill Is Gone?
Can you play it for us? You bring it hard?
I've got them. I don't know if I can do it in the key. I need a guitar player. I need a real guitar player.
We're about on time. We're running kind of down here. And I think it'd be nice if we kind of ended out with some Delta music here. If we could get Hardwick and Eddie to play a little bit for us, and we'll kind of wind ourselves out of here. We can actually rock on this floor, I think, to do that. So this is kind of what we've been doing. This is what we do. No, it's not right.
I got these cheap tennis on.
But somebody asked me, what do folklorists do? Well, this is what we do. And then, not long ago at a Creole conference, I was in the back of the room with about 200 Creole people, and finally this Creole lady looked over at me and she said, is this what you do? And I said, yeah, I like it. And it's a lot of fun, and this is what we do. And Eddie's right. You learn about culture from people. I mean, if you want to understand people and understand a region, you got to go out and talk to the people and get the people to talk to you. And it is what we do. The Creole Heritage Center here is working on Creole culture. Codafil's working on the language really hard for Creoles. Charles LaRocque at Codafil says that the Cajun sail has filled, that he's waiting for the Creole language sail to set. So we're working with people in Haiti and Guadeloupe, all through the Caribbean. So that French is still here, still alive, and those traditions are still here. The Creole Heritage Center will be 20 years old next year, so you have to come to that party. And so we're all here and we're all working, and we invite you to help us. Help us keep the culture going, keep things alive. And I'm going to let Hardwick and Eddie go. Oh yeah, come to the festival. That's the way to do it.
They can see Easter Rock there.
And yeah, and Susan reminded me the Easter Rock will be at the festival, so you can see I'm kind of being at your Easter Rock.
I want to tell you something. As a relative newcomer here, less than 20 years, I read something about a guy who asked an old man in the Denver area about how many people live there. He said, "Oh, there's so many people, but so few folks." When I first came to this area and started going to these conferences, I felt like we had academics talking to academics. We had people scurrying around trying to get their grants and write their papers, and very few were going to read, and then nothing came back to the people. And I just think there have been incremental progress with the folk festival and what you guys have done and this type of thing, that there have been folks here tonight, and thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you very much.
Thrill is gone. Thrill is gone away. Oh, the thrill is gone. Thrill is gone away. All the still live on. You're gonna be lonely one day. I said the thrill is gone.
Say what?
It's gone away from me. Thrill is gone. It's gone away from me. No, I'm gonna be open all day. Someday I'm gonna be free. Sometimes we just say, free baby,
Free baby.
free baby. Oh, I'm free from despair. Said I'm free, free, free. Oh, I'm free from despair. Baby said, now that it's all over, now all I can do is wish you well. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Let loose.
Short version.
I guess the folks are still here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry Mandy's not here. The State Folklife program has run for a good long while. It started way back under Governor Tree, and it's been one of the better folklife programs in the state, funded or underfunded or not funded. It's been able to keep itself going one way or another. And Ardrick mentioned Don Hatley, and I'm trying to find him. He's hiding from me. Don Hatley came here and started the Northwestern Folklife Festival. And it's probably the oldest festival in the state now. And it's gone on, it's kind of diminished in size, but not in quality over time. And so Don and I and a few other people worked on that festival for 38 years, hardly keeps count. I try to forget. So anyway, it is, what the idea was that we brought the people to the people, that we didn't get too academic. It wasn't an academic folkloristic meeting. It was a meeting where people could come and meet people who were still doing their thing and talk to people. We went out and hunted crafts in the communities. We didn't go from festival to festival, the art show to art show. We went to towns. We had a festival in Faraday in the Delta back in the 70s. The community had the festival, and they provided all the music and all the crafts and all the foods. We ate coon, we ate possum, we made fishing nets. We had all kinds. We had the rock. We had all the rock songs. We had Hezekiah Early, who's coming to the festival this year. Had the blues band that's really cool, and he's still playing. It's 38 years later, and so that music grew out of that community. The whole community came together for that festival. They had a barber. The barber set his chair up in town. He cut your hair for free. So the town was there, the people were there, and that's what the festival here wanted to do for everybody. Come to the festival and meet Louisiana, meet your neighbors, and have a good time. And thank you so much for coming tonight. Appreciate it.